Complete this sentence in your head, please. The story I tell about myself is. We have been listening to inspiring stories all day today. We've learned how to pour into others, how to be safe, yet it is still hard for us to complete the sentence. The story I tell about myself is. I've used this as a prompt as a storytelling coach for nearly 2 decades, and it is always hard for us to start our story. We get caught up on how do we get it perfect? Does it have any value? Does anyone want to hear it? And no matter where we think our story is going to go when we start, it always changes. Storytelling is messy, it is uncomfortable. And the surprises lying dormant in an untold story often become our change agents. Storytelling has been sacred through cultures for centuries, primarily because our brain is just naturally hardwired for story. It's how we make sense of things and put meaning to things. Stories can unite us or divide us, affecting how we play the game of life, how we score ourselves and measure our successes. But what I have primarily seen coaching story is how it roots us into belonging, creating this unseen container for connection and community and healing, oftentimes setting us in bold new directions each time that new story is unearthed. Now, I have not always set out to be a storyteller. Though if you ask my siblings, they will tell you something different. They will say I've always been making up stories. But today, I offer you a few of my storytelling styles as an invitation to you to go out and tell yours. I speak down home, farm girl, Southern. I can chew the fat off the high end of the hog and suck those knuckles clean like my mama. Fluent in the stylings of daddy's little girl, crawling up on his lap to steer that truck down back roads before I could even reach the pedals, and involuntarily respond with a yes, sir, or ma'am. It is not the same as yes. It is definitely not a yeah. I am the youngest of 10 Brady Bunch kids growing up in a family of teachers, of scientists and language teachers on a big old farm. I grew up in a lot of stories growing up. Stories sewn into patches of dresses and tucked inside jars of canned tomatoes or baked inside sourdough bread. Stories of strong women who defied the narratives that they were told that they should accept in an effort to live the stories they felt compelled to live, but who also didn't feel threatened by the stories of others. My great-grandmother worked for the state of Tennessee in a time when women were not appreciated in the workforce. That in turn inspired my grandmother to be among the first women enrolled at Vanderbilt University. And she, in turn, packed a station wagon down filled with banana bread and sheet music and dresses that she had sewn in between teaching school and teaching piano lessons after school and keeping up with a farm, all so that she could cart my mother and 2 of her friends all across the Southeast in an effort to go to singing contests to get scholarships so that they could go to school and start their bold stories. I watched as all my elder siblings struggled to find their stories. Army officer, beauty queen, accountant, nurse, stay-at-home mom, doctor, country singer. And what I learned in that process was that there was space for all those different stories to coexist. So that by the time of 18, when 3 of my siblings had passed and a good friend was murdered, I realized the impermanency of life. I felt emboldened to build a bigger container for my stories, not just for me, but also for the ones that weren't here any longer. So, no regrets became my mantra. And I set out to have as many adventures as I could to build bold new stories. At 22, with the world of adventure stretched out before me, I took those opportunities that seemed the most promising for great plot development or character building on the fabric of my unmarked life. Opportunities that brought Bob Dylan sneaking up beside me to whisper in my ear, "Eeny, meeny, miny, moe." Where I got the best seat each night to bring sexy back, or see the gambler stuffed into a box and rolled through a sea of 35,000 fans. It was a bird's eye view that made me feel like I was special. But then I looked down at my dirty clothes and my food-stained shoes, and reality set in. At this time in my life, I was juggling 2 careers, as every good artist should. I was the managing director of a nonprofit theater company, and I was also a crew chief for touring hospitality. I would build these big backstage worlds, and crews would be building these big, massive stages, and it was all under this intense time pressure. And my crew was the one to feed them. Now, no day looked exactly alike, but it always seemed to come together. And I would watch as these different people with all their different stories seemed to be reaching for something universal. And then it was so cool at the end of every show watching how strangers' stories collided in shared experience. I mean, haven't you ever gone to an event? You don't know who's sitting beside you, but somewhere, midway through the show, you're giving them a knowing glance, or you're giving them a high five, or you might even be in tears and you throw an arm around them. And you did not go to that show to be vulnerable or to make a friend, but the space allowed for it. I'd watch that each night, and I realized in that moment that the messy, chaotic spaces, the ones where we feel imperfect, uncertain, and exhausted, is where we can meet each other with more generosity. By January of 2010, I was touring full-time, on the road, nonstop, when my mother died suddenly from a brain aneurysm. And in an instant, I became the keeper of my family's stories. I mean, I could feel her baton pass to me, and I was definitely not ready to carry it. A little while later, I quit touring altogether. I changed careers. I felt frozen by the magnitude of trying to get her stories preserved and perfect and passed on to the next generation. But then somewhere, I realized that all that striving for perfection was making me miss out on all those messy surprises in life where courage and confidence are forged, and all that complexity that threads us all together. So, in an effort to overcome this perfection, I returned to creative writing. And from that, I got an invitation to a storytelling show, which led me to a storytelling workshop, which then led me to produce a storytelling show of my own in 2013. Woo! And I felt like I was finally running with my mother's baton. I mean, I started just going in an all-out sprint. I started telling stories at every stage I could find. I started incorporating stories into my professional coaching. But then I realized I wanted to tell stories in my hometown. And Murfreesboro didn't have a space for me to tell stories in the multi-genre art way that I wanted to. So I decided to test out, on a whim, storytelling in a fundraiser that I was doing for United Way. And there I met Corey Wells. Corey Wells was our inaugural poet laureate of Murfreesboro, and she was building spaces for poets to get together and share their voices. So on a coffee date, with no budget, no plan, no real idea, Corey and I decided that we would build these stages for multi-genre art, music, poetry, storytelling, and honestly, whatever else would come up. We were like, yes, let's do it. And we did it under these broad themes like defibrillator for a Valentine's show, or cornbread and casseroles for a Mother's Day feel. About a year in, I decided to call it the Bloom Stage. I mean, I've always loved watching things grow in nature, and blooming is that moment when a flower has to leave its safe, protective confines in order to stretch out and transform into something else and live. To me, that is a deep metaphor for courage and trust. Growth happens in the moments before we get brave. Research actually backs this up. Growth requires discomfort. Neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to rewire, retrain ourselves, activates in the moments when we step out of familiarity. In Bloom Stage's 8 years, 29 shows, over 300 performers and nearly 3,000 audience members later, I have seen this growth happen at every show. Someone steps up to that microphone and they say, I've written for years, but I have never shared anything publicly. Or, I've never done anything like this in my entire life. And then they proceed to knock the socks off of that audience every time. Sometimes it's something that someone needed to tell, and other times it's something that the audience needed to hear, but always, that courage inspires bravery in our community. We've seen people go on to publish books for the first time, musicians that have gone on to play big arena stadiums. There is a cybersecurity consultant who now shares her visual art with a global platform. Or there's the aptly named Bliss, who started telling poetry as a teenager, and now she's turned into this masterful aerial artist, just dangling from the ceiling while sharing her generational wisdom. Or Carol, who found her husband's suitcase of Vietnam War photographs, and she turned something painful into an art installation that brought the audience to its feet. Each stage I have ever stood near, farm field, tour bus, arena, this room, have taught me this. When someone risks telling their story, it makes space for community to happen. The story I tell about myself is I build brave spaces where people can bloom, not perfect ones, just bold ones that invite us to turn the ordinary into something extraordinary and remind us that the stories we carry are not good or bad, they are just ours. So, what story are you going to go out there and tell to build a bolder, braver community? Thank you.